We design and manufacture universal control panels for the broadcast and AV industry, and today we'll dive deep into router control. We'll connect with your routers from Grass Valley, Riedel, Panasonic, Blackmagic Design, Ross, vMix, Vizrt, and even more brands, and we'll deliver the same unified control experience across them. But we offer more than just a free choice of router for you. We give you the exact form factor of control surface that you need. So what you'll see today can be done on your SKAARHOJ Rackfly Uno, Duo, Trio, which features the innovative 4-way buttons. It can also be done on Rack Pro series with the legendary NKK broadcast keys, or even on a Rack Control Uno with encoder knobs. So in today's video, the focus is on the configuration concept that we have developed across these routers and control panels. So welcome to the heart of SKAARHOJ land. And in SKAARHOJ land, we have a Rackfly Duo and a Rack Pro 1 controller today. The Rack Pro 1 has the NKK keys, the Rackfly Duo has the 4-way buttons, and we'll also see how that plays a role in how they operate, but the patterns are the same. This is the configuration UI, and we see the, it's actually a window into the software running on the Rackfly Duo. It is today also hosting the Rack Pro 1. It's not the focus of the video, but the Rack Pro 1 is actually managed by the Rackfly Duo today. What it also means is that the connections to our smart Videohub and also the Riedel MicroN here and another Videohub we have in our facility, that is a single connection by the Rackfly Duo shared between these two panels. That's a technical detail. But anyway, you see that configuration interface here. Both of them have the same routers set up, and we'll get back to that in a moment. Let's first dive into the basics of routing, and that is you select an output. So we have some outputs from the router here, 7 altogether. Then we have a paging button that brings us to the last output here, or it was 8, but we have 8 outputs clearly visible. I'll select graphics, and then these are the inputs, the green ones. So I select input 2, input 3, or camera 4. The labels are in the display is another SKAARHOJ feature, right? So that is now routed to the graphics. Actually, if we look at the graphics on the other panel, you'll see that this follows along. So if I choose the Rackfly Duo, it is exactly the same feature, and it's reflected on the Rack Pro 1 immediately. Okay, so that's the basics of routing. We can also gang route, and that means we can select multiple outputs. So let's say that we go to TX1, TX2, and TX3. If I want to route to these 3 in one go, then I can do it by selecting them, pressing and holding. And you see actually across these, it seems like the first one here has probably an output on another page. This seems to be this program output. And just come back to this view. If we go to number 2, then we have another output selected, and then finally we have camera 1 here on TX3. So if I select these are so different outputs, and now I route camera number 4 to all 3 of these in one go. And of course it's the same thing that you can do down here. Notice that between these two panels, because there are different amounts of buttons, we have a different division. We can show up to 12 sources on the Rackfly Duo and 12 inputs and 12 outputs, while here we need the pager button because we are out of keys basically. That is 20 keys altogether. All right, so and that's actually one of the points, that is you can pick any SKAARHOJ panel that fits best your situation. If you want a 1 unit or 2 rack unit device, if you want the one or the other type of keys. So depending on your situation, you would choose your capacity on the panel, but the pattern of how you do the routing is the same, as you can already see now. Okay, so if we pick these outputs here, then I could do the exact same thing as I just did, namely do gang routing across them. They now all have the same source picked right there. Below on this panel, we have presets. So presets is a way you can store a route on the panel, and then you can recall it later, okay? So we have a preset called football here, and actually let's just make a preset. So we take the first output here and we route camera 1 to it. With the next output we route camera 3, and the next output we take camera 5. And then we will store that in a preset called football, okay? So I press this button, it is now stored. Now we will go through and select something else now from the back of the input row here. So we picked some sources up here and we'll store that on the basketball preset. Okay, so if I recall the preset called football, we will see that this one jumps back to that. And now if we just pick these, actually we could just gang select these, because that means we'll see the sources 1, 3, and 5 that was selected. So when that was the recall of football, now I recall basketball, we'll actually see they are flipping up here, because now we selected the upper inputs for the 3 first outputs on the router. All right, so that's the preset recall. Actually, this would work up here, because that's a feature in what we call the device core. That is the software we developed to integrate with the routers. It's stored in there. So if we do similar things, let's just go to the first page of outputs, and then we select these outputs here. We'll see that, of course, the routes are there. If I recall basketball, they switch and back to football, so it's the same thing. If I hold down the shift key, you'll see that our presets are available now. You see the first is recalling of presets, and then we have a pager so we can go through the presets available. So I can also recall presets football on this panel. So let's just recall basketball. We can see the sources will change down here. Recalled, because it's all stored in the device core. So both panels are operating with the same information source. Talking about output selection, there's another feature I want to show you, namely that you can lock an output. So if you press and hold an output, a little lock icon will appear in the display, and what it means is that you just can't route anything to that output right now because it's locked. And you see, again, this is also reflected on the other panel, so it's a feature that is not panel specific, but basically in the device core integration. So it means that I can also unlock that particular output right here. So the next thing I want to show you is that we can route on different routers. We have 3 routers today, and if you enter into the engineering menu, you can pick your destination. See, that's panel specific though. So if I go to the engineering menu, I do that by holding down shift on the Rackfly Duo, and now I'm in the engineering menu. If I press here and press that button, I'm in the engineering menu. And you see in both cases, I have the Videohub 12 by 12 selected, okay, but I can select another router on one of the panels if I want, okay? So that's one thing. Now we are in the engineering menu. Let me just quickly show you a few things. We have display brightness that we can set. You can cycle through on this panel here. There we go. Or you can even, using the 4-way buttons, smart, right? Because that has edge detection. So if I press the edges of the button, I will turn up and down the display brightness. Over here we are just cycling through, or if it is dim time, I can cycle through, then I can hold and I can reverse the direction, while over here I just press the sides of the buttons. Okay, that's a small little detail, but we are looking at these features in the engineering menu up here, and in a moment. But right now I have selected a different router on this panel down here, and I've selected a different router on that one. Let's just exit the menus, and you'll see now that the labels on both panels are different, because I'm on a different router. With the Riedel MicroN router, we can operate with levels, and we see that on this router, on the lower row, we have levels selected, okay? So right now we are routing to all levels, but if I pick one of these levels, you'll see that I can make an alternative routing for that one. So now I picked input number 1 instead of input number 4, but if I go to some of the other levels, it is still at 4, and if I go back to all, you see that now both inputs are actually selected, because on the 4K level, it was 1, on the other levels it was still 4, and that's how levels are working. So that's also supported by this configuration. That's super cool. Now let's just go back into the engineering menu, go back to the Videohub 40, and then I want to talk about take. The take button, we can integrate a take button basically. So right now we do direct routing. When I press a button, it makes the route. If we enable take, exit, now we get a take button. So I have an output selected, the wall monitor, and I select a different input, and it doesn't happen before I press this take button. And you even see which 2 outputs and inputs are in question. If I press the take button, it happens, okay? So I now pick another input, I can now either take or I can clear. So if I press clear, it just clears the temporary selection of input. So I can pick any input I want. If I go back to this one, it's basically also clearing, but take, and it does the take. Okay, so there's a little feature associated with this one. Actually, if you go back to the MicroN as an example, oh wait, sorry. In here, if we go to the detail view and exit, you'll see that as I select another input, it actually shows that input number 7 is routed to output number 4. So that's shown in the display here for the take button. So that's an interesting little thing that you can enable, symbol or detailed view on the take button. So, and now I'm just going back to the symbol version of it. Then we have what is called level on boot. Let me just mention that. That is whether it remembers which level you had selected or it takes all layers from last time. So whether it remembers or not is selected on this key, this toggle. And now finally we have come to a feature where we can work with the complete layout of the panels, namely this one over here that is called layout. It is now saying even split single row. We have one called in priority, single row. We have out priority, single row. And then we have dual row. Let's just go to the dual row version. Now, dual row, it sounds like something that would actually use both rows. And yes, now you have a cross point panel where we select the outputs on the upper row and the inputs on the lower row. So let's just play with this. And I want to go back to my Videohub 40, which I promised you I would show you. So you select an output and the lower input row here is immediately responding to it by showing which input is being routed currently. So it's kind of a way to just use the panel differently depending on what your needs are. If you don't need presets on your Rackfly Duo, you can instead use the lower row as a complete input select row while the upper row is just outputs. So that's a different layout. And in this case, because we have 40 inputs, we still have a paging button over here for both the inputs and the outputs. So that's a standard feature if you go above. If you have less, let's go into the engineering menu, pick the 12 by 12. Then we're out here, basically, yeah, we are running out of things to put on the last keys over here. So you could map custom stuff or you just have 12. Now, if you look into this panel up here, question could be, do we also have a dual row version up here? And actually the answer is no, because it doesn't make sense when you have only a single row of buttons, right? All right, so what about the others? Well, we could try the Rack Pro 1 panel and look at that. The even split single row, that is actually the mode that we have been operating in from the beginning of this demonstration. But if we choose in priority and exit, what you'll see is that we have outputs, 5 outputs and a pager. So yes, we do still have access to all outputs we can select, like output number 16. But then we have more inputs available. And the pager is therefore less, because now we just need to page up to 40. That's all it takes here. So input priority would be if you have a few outputs and many inputs that you typically want to route. If you move into the other type, output priority, you get the exact opposite. That means you have many different outputs that you want a few inputs to be routed to. And then, of course, the one called even split is where you have equal amount of both. On the Rackfly Duo, we are currently in the dual mode. And if we change over to the Videohub 40 and exit, we witness how we have these additional pages up here. And we also do not have the presets that we had a moment ago. But actually, it doesn't mean that you are basically missing out on them. You can still access the presets, but in this case you need to hold down the shift key and you get then the preset recall and the preset storage on the lower row of buttons here. So they are still there, they are just hidden behind the shift key, and that's one of the features of the dual row layout that we saw on this one. In the configuration of the Rackfly Duo, I am able to change the order and label the inputs and outputs differently. So if we click in here, we see the basically every one of the devices I'm connected to, the 12 by 12, the MicroN router, the 40 by 40, and at the end we have buttons that brings us into settings for the inputs and outputs and presets. So we can give the names and colors and change the order and so on. So let's try do that for the inputs. So put your attention on this lower row of buttons down here. If I'm pressing the mute button, I'm basically hiding an input, okay? So we see that's happening right now, and I'll just bring it back to life here so that we see those inputs again. I can name them if I want. Hello world. I'll just type that in for these two. And you'll see immediately the labels are changing on these two inputs here. I can also color them differently. So I want purple on the first one here, and I want, well, green was probably not the best choice since we already have it, but cyan would be another color that I could apply. And then I can also change the order. So if I drag these two, I'm just swapping them on the panel. Of course, the input number is what you see in this drop down. So I can also immediately just change the input. So this is still input 1 and 2. And that's how the settings table here is working. So you can do that for all 40 inputs on this panel. And of course, you can delete entries and add entries, etc. There's a whole lot of things you can do in here. And that is also true for the Rec Pro 1. So same thing for those two panels. And now I want to show you something related to the layout that we had a moment ago. So let's just go back to the even split single row layout, which we have right here. And if we enter into this one, it really doesn't matter if it's the one or the other, but we have a configuration that makes it possible for you to even customize this view. And if we find the one called even split here, then we see the input page size is 12. And that would correspond to the size of the input page of this one down here. So what do you think happens if I change this to, say, 8? Then this section would actually be reduced to now have 7 keys associated with selecting an input and then a paging button out here to access the remaining ones, okay? And now I can also pick the offset. So if I want to move this, let's say 3 positions in this direction, because it turned out that it was actually overlaying a connection color in that LED. So if I change this from 12 to 15, it means that I move the whole thing. And you can do the same for the output page size. Let's say that I want to extend that to include those. Then I can change this to 15. And now the output selector is taking up the space. So now I reduce the input and increase the output. So even the input and output priority layouts can be, you can customize layouts so that you can get exactly the layout that you want. These are sort of our defaults that you can go by. But it's possible for you to tweak it even more to achieve the exact layout that you would like. Thanks for tuning in. If you are new here, don't forget to like and subscribe so you can stay updated on the latest control integration news for your favorite broadcast equipment. You can also connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and X, and you can subscribe to our newsletter, and that's a great way to keep in touch with SKAARHOJ. If you have any questions that need a personal touch, our sales and support team is, of course, always ready to help you. Thanks for watching.